They were alive. Today, I'm going to be talking about one of my favorite kinds of hospitality, and that is deathbed hospitality. I gave a heads up throughout the week that we were going to be talking about this, and I don't intend to be super graphic. I just want to explore the privilege that is participating in deathbed hospitality as humans and as Christians, and the service that we can render to others, and the gift that is given to us by participating in this. Addie is at family camp, and she said that it was all right that I covered this one. She's going to pick up when she comes back next week or the next week with kind of the end of her hospitality series. Let's see. So some of this might seem kind of disjointed, but I kind of just as thoughts that I had and biblical examples I saw of deathbed hospitality, as I thought of them, I started to list them out and really let myself think and ponder what should I glean from this? Because these are examples to me, and how are they? So to start, how many of you can raise your hand, have been able to sit at the bedside of someone who is dying, literally? Okay. How many of you have held their hand? How many helped with their physical care? How many of you helped clean the body when they passed? Yeah, these are kind of levels of involvement, and it's not supreme to hit the most level, but these are different levels of intimacy depending on who you are to the family and who you are to the person that's passing. But these are all steps and stages of hospitality. So I want to read, it's actually a blog article, but it's from, it's a religious magazine online that puts out different articles, and I'm going to read a selection of it. And this is a woman reflecting on death. And I will also mention that she's going to bring up a miscarriage in this article. The writer writes, "All the deathbeds that I have seen have been on stage or on a screen. I've never been present at one, or at least I've never been able to care for someone dying who had already been born. I have been the deathbed for my 3 children lost through miscarriage. My husband and I arranged memorial masses, but we didn't have the opportunity to care directly for our children as they died, or to tend to their bodies. For many people, a parent's death, like my dad, for instance, will be the first one that they see up close. There will be no apprenticeship. They will be responsible without preparation for doing right by someone dear to them. Why hold death at such a remove, making us all novices, waiting for a death too close to be avoided before we learn about how to help someone die well? In American history, death began to be professionalized and managed at a remove from those closest to the dying during the Civil War. There's a book written by Drew Gilpin Faust called This Republic of Suffering, Death in the American Civil War. It's very interesting. The writer explains how clergy and doctors staged managed the death of the soldiers they cared for. They would narrate a good death that drifted towards standardization in the letters they sent to inform the dead soldiers' loved ones, almost as a way of protecting them. The bodies, too, were prepared for them, the family, not by them. Embalming first took root in the United States during the Civil War. It offered a way to preserve bodies that otherwise would not have made it home whole. So it was very practical. After the war, embalming by a professional replaced the simple funeral rites of washing a corpse that could be done at home. Cremation, which became legal in England in the late 1800s, offered another alternative to caring for the body in its natural state. In The Work of the Dead, a book by Thomas LaCour, he explains how the supporters of cremation praised it as hygienic and modern, falsely characterizing new dead bodies as pestilent and dangerous. The most responsible thing, they said, was to keep the dead at a distance. Tending to the dead thus became a matter for professionals, an art that required chemicals and fire, not simple soap and winding sheets. Advances in medicine also contributed to this trend. New treatments and procedures required medical professionals to administer them. Over time, caring for our dying loved ones became something one could delegate almost entirely to others. What had once been a natural duty became optional. It is unlikely that death will ever become as familiar to most of us as it was to most of our ancestors. Too much has changed. Still, there are things we can do to keep it from disappearing from our view altogether. Children should be given chances to witness all the corporeal works of mercy, including burying the dead, and they should be invited to participate as they get older. We can seek out ways to care for the dead and the dying by volunteering at hospitals, nursing homes, or different volunteer communities. We can resolve not to avoid the subject in conversation where it naturally comes up. We can read and discuss books that help us imagine choices we will face and begin to prepare for them. Some may find this morbid, but it is really just a matter of getting serious about our own mortality and that of others. Caring for the dying and the dead is an act of hospitality, the last one we get to offer someone. It is always difficult work, but we have made it harder and rarer than it should be by sheltering ourselves so carefully from any glimpse of death. She speaks again. During my miscarriages, caring for my children in death was the only bodily form of love I was ever able to offer them. This corporal work of mercy is balm to the mourner as well as to the dead. When death comes again, I want to be prepared to better accept this gift of love God sends with every loss. So she wraps up by speaking about the reciprocal gift that mourning and caring for the dead can bring. I love that some cultures, and we'll in a moment reflect on those cultures in the Bible, that some of them really have their hands in death. They wrap the body, sing with the body, people host a wake in their homes, and some people still do this today, even in our own country, in different subcultures in the U.S. This isn't always practical in our current situation, but the concept remains that we should not hide death away from each other. We sit and we mourn. Jesus knew good and well he was going to resurrect Lazarus, right? But we know that we shall be resurrected with one another someday. But still we sit and we mourn. Sometimes being at the deathbed is raw and painful, and you feel like you're subjecting yourself to something that otherwise you don't need to. One that came to my mind, and it's not a perfect parallel, but I think about Mary. She was at her son's side when he was dying, at his deathbed, so to speak. I read the passage in John 19, 25 through 27. Someone actually wants to pull that out and read it for me. I'd love to hear it. John 19, 25 through 27. This is a small passage that shows us where Mary was when her own son was dying. You can holler, I got it, when you got it.
You said 21?
John 19, 25 through 27.
I got it. But standing by the cross of Jesus were his mother and his mother's sister, Mary, the wife of Clopas, and Mary Magdalene. When Jesus saw his mother and the disciple whom he loved standing nearby, he said to his mother, Woman, behold your son. Then he said to the disciple, Behold your mother. And from that hour, the disciples took her to his own home.
There's a lot of reciprocal caretaking in that moment too. Mary is sitting by him, giving him presents, which for him is a comfort. Being there, witnessing this, even though the easier thing is to not be there and not witness it, the easier thing emotionally. And Jesus is able to also, we know he designates care in that moment. He's continuing to care for his mother in this moment. I have a major regret of my own, of not visiting my own grandmother when I knew she was dying, because I could not handle it. This was when I was pregnant with Patsy. Maybe she was born, I don't know. I couldn't handle it. Like I couldn't, pre-counseling Amber, could not handle it. I could not sit in someone else's grief because I already couldn't handle my own. And I regret not driving 4 hours just to see her. It's a big regret of mine. And I don't sit in that regret and make myself feel weighed by it. I allow it to propel myself to a different action moving forward, right? But I remember the way I thought I was protecting myself, and I didn't have the skill set to process that grief, but I didn't even try and practice. And so I see his mother, instead of a lot of other people were not at the cross, right? A lot of other people went and hid. But she was there, and she was weeping and grieving right there with him. Something else that the author touches on in that blog article is normalizing death, especially with your children. We talk about dying and death in Bible class quite a bit, right? So-and-so died, this person died, they killed this person. But do you talk about it at home? Do you talk about it in a compassionate environment where your children can safely explore that concept, or even your spouse can safely explore that concept with you? I hear a lot of movements that rightfully want to normalize talking about sex in the church. Let us be a safe place to learn. Let us be a safe place to ask questions, not the internet, not your coworker. Let this be a place where you can find truth and compassion about sex, about things that lead to addiction. Sometimes it's sexual addiction, substance abuse. Let this be a safe place for me to retreat when I've done something wrong. But do we talk about death as something to learn from? Because the world has a lot to say about death. And it's you run hard, you run fast, and you live your life hard before you get there, right? What is that? Live fast, die young. People phrases like that you hear the world say. Death is something to be feared, something we don't talk about, something we put off at all costs. That's what the world tells us. But what are we teaching each other about death? Let's see. I think we should make ourselves more comfortable talking about death without pointing fingers and accusing someone of being too morbid. If we do not provide ourselves with the emotional space to process the concept, we end up completely debilitated when it happens to someone we love. Jesus spent a lot of time foretelling his departure from the earth. When he died, they were kind of shocked because they didn't get it. But at least some of them didn't. But, he knew he was going to die the whole time. And it was an open conversation with his disciples about this thing is coming, this thing is happening, this is going to happen. This is space for us to understand and prepare ourselves for it. And also to equip them going into his death. Patsy asks me all the time things like, is Pa Ken going to die? Yes, he is. Okay, when is he going to die? Well, I can't know that, and we're not to decide that either. I can't know it, I can't decide it, but I do know that I'm alive right now and what we can do right now. Speak about death at a level that's digestible for children. Maybe you've got teenagers, and they're like, hey, I'm really scared of this. Can I talk to you about it? Are you scared of it too? Are you able to sit in that conversation with your teenager, with your spouse? I think also of Jeffrey's grandparents talk to me all the time about how they're going to die. Because Nana said, I really need you to get helping me clean so that my kids don't have to do it once I die. Got it. And so she'll sit and she'll tell me about different death goals she has, stuff before she dies, and she's very frank with it, and I so appreciate it. And Jeffrey went out to lunch with his granddad a couple years ago and just asked him, are you scared of dying? Give them that space. Because I bet they are. I bet they don't feel like they can talk about it to anyone. Because if my dad came to me and said, I'm really thinking about that, when I'm going to die, how am I going to react? Am I going to say, Dad, don't say that. Don't, no. No, it's going to happen. Everyone in this room is going to die. It's just as typical and normal as being born, right? I'm kind of rambling about that, but giving your elders a space to process their pending death. Yes, ma'am.
When my mother was up in the village with us, she's 83
Yeah.
years old. There's the potential that she could die. She's got, what I mean.
Yep.
Anyway, so I said, Mom, if you die while you're up here in the village, what do you want us to do with your body?
Mm-hmm.
And she said, I want you to take my body out on the ice, and when the ocean melts, I'll just sink to the bottom and I'll be gone.
That's cost effective. I'll tell you what. Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
Having my 94-year-old father living with me it's almost a daily conversation.
Yeah.
We talk about it. Of course, having lost my mom before he came up, I think it's a daily conversation about mom's death, about him dying.
Yeah.
It's pretty constant, and it's become real matter of fact. But he's so diligent about getting. He wants to wear his military uniforms. We have to dig it out. Okay, took it to the cleaners. Had to get everything all set up.
Yeah.
I want the gloves. I want this. I want that. And that all. Okay, got that done.
Mm-hmm.
And so we've just gone from one thing to the next to the next. Not like he's gonna die tomorrow. He's
No.
lived another 10 years because he's so
Yeah.
happy. But the latest thing is I've said, Dad, how about you start working on your obituary? So
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. I said, you know way more. And I said, when Mom died, I had to ask you.
Yeah.
And I said, when you die, I don't have anybody to ask.
Yeah.
So hey, you start working on this.
Yes. My dad's mother, my grandmommy that I did not, the one who I was not able to visit, I did go to her funeral, and she had who's singing what song? It was a full-blown church service. It was like a Southern funeral. It was like almost 2 hours long of singing and singing. She loved singing, and she had 6 kids. All of them are preachers except my dad. His joke is he doesn't have to get paid to go to church. But so that's fine with my husband and my dad. But she had scheduled, that was her celebration. Boy, she was excited for her funeral. And she said, I'm sick of it here. Like, towards the end, she told my dad things like, yeesh, we need to get going. Dad's like, okay, you know. It was alarming for him, but for her, yes, ma'am.
You know, we say that, 90, 80, whatever, but any of us could die going home tonight.
Yep.
Or this afternoon.
Yes.
Yeah.
And as responsible adults, we need to have some of that ready for our family.
Yeah.
Because, and I just bought a package that you can put everything in there. I mean, it's like 100 and something pages
Wow.
that you go through and fill out.
Mhm.
What do you want at your funeral? What are your passwords? What are your bank accounts? Where's your life insurance? Put
Yeah.
all of that basically in a binder.
Mhm.
And that way, when you do die,
Yeah.
it's not if, when you
Yep.
do die,
Mhm.
nobody has to go anywhere but to that binder.
Yeah.
And here's everything. These are the songs I want sung
Yeah.
at my
Yeah.
funeral. Because if you don't tell anybody, I mean, especially like for me as a single person,
Yeah.
I don't go tell Brenda, be sure they sing,
Yeah.
And is she gonna remember that? I mean, she wrote it
Right.
on a note maybe, but I need to have that.
Yeah.
We all do, in all honesty.
At what level, whatever level that applies to you.
Whatever level that applies to you.
Yeah.
But you should have that information, because what if you've got a life insurance policy out there for, I don't know, $250,000 and you die, do they know it's there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, Miss Penny. Were you gonna say something, Miss Penny?
Oh, I was just talking, when she was talking about if you had the life
Uh-huh.
insurance out there for 250,000, I told Bonnie, I wish.
Yeah, I know. Yes, Miss Kim.
But.
Oh, yes, Miss
I
Penny.
did, but
No,
she
go ahead.
reminded me, Lauren said in Thailand, they don't talk, they didn't want to mention dying and death. Not in sermons, not anywhere. They just don't talk about it. When we first got there, they prepared the body. When somebody died, they wash the body, they
Mhm.
dress the body, they put their favorite, anything in a casket.
Yeah.
They go through that all the time. And then they provide a meal for everybody that comes for about
Yes.
a week,
Yes.
and that kind of thing. But Lauren was always saying about his, they would ask him, and he says, just throw me in the sea. He says, I've been eating fish all these years, they can eat me.
Oh, goodness. What a thing. What a thing to say. Oh, boy. Yes, Miss Kim.
Well, I was going to say that, have you ever heard that term, I'm ready to die, but not today?
Yes.
You hear that, and sometimes we live like that, because we don't prepare, we don't
Yeah.
have things laid out there, or like, I told you a couple weeks ago, and you said, no, don't blame myself.
I know.
Write down the discussion, just like, no, you've got to be ready.
I know. Miss Kim did a treacherous voyage to deliver a stack of papers that I left on my husband's desk to Homer. And I was like, I will never forgive myself if you guys die en route.
So be careful.
And she was like, well, if it's my time to go, it's my time to go. And I was like, Miss Kim, I'm like, but it's on my head because I'm the one who forgot the papers. But that's Miss Kim's response to everything.
She was just a good work though, right?
Yes. Yes, it's Penny.
But that's what we're going through right now. I've got 60-some years of papers, and I did not write on them or keep them like I should. There's been too much traveling, too much. And if you can write, at least on the back of the pictures you've given,
Right.
or things like that, that's done, and somebody doesn't have to come in and do it and write dates on things.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
I forget away, and I can tell you all the time, people come in, and when somebody in their family dies, it's the first time they've ever dealt with it.
Yes.
Ever. But we have people come in all the time, and we always ask them, we want the beneficiary on your account. And the people who do that are helping the people in their family.
Yes,
absolutely.
To do that. So if you ever get a chance to name the beneficiary, please do.
Beneficiaries are not a threat. You're gone by the time they're active.
Yes,
What if
because it is like a
torture my
old
kids?
commercial, set it and forget it.
Yeah.
Here to shop.
Absolutely. Yes, Miss Penny.
But the other thing is credit cards, as we are raised, the husband's the head of the family, no one's money.
Oh, yeah.
Everything. Well, then they say that, credit cards, change your credit card, to my name.
Yeah.
I can use his anymore once you give
Oh.
him
Wow.
certificates and things. And so we should both each have a credit card, because then I got a new credit card, but they sent it to the wrong address.
Yeah.
We don't have a box at our house.
Mm.
We have to go to the mailbox, and they send a physical address.
Great.
So I waited 3 weeks, and in the meantime, everybody, utility companies,
Mhm.
you name it, everybody is wanting the auto pays and all that, because it's going through, but not going through because it's in his name.
Oh, no.
And I'm waiting on credit cards all this time, so it's a real hassle. So my advice to women is have your own credit card in your name as
Sure.
well as your husband's.
Well,
So the-
not just that, but there's a lot of cases where even utilities,
Mhm.
your name's not on there as allowed to talk to them, they won't,
Yeah.
nothing,
Yeah.
they won't do
Yeah.
anything with it.
We put all our kids on the beneficiary,
Right.
onto the banks.
So it's thinking it makes me think of in 2 Timothy 4, 6 through 8, Paul is writing Timothy towards the end of his life. Paul says, as for me, this is the NLT, for me, my life has already been poured out as an offering to God. The time of my death is near. I have fought the good fight, I have finished the race, and I have remained faithful. And now the prize awaits me, the crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, will give me on the day of his return. And the prize is not just for me, but for all who eagerly look forward to his appearing. Paul's creating a space to talk about the impending death. I mean, he's going to die, he knows it. And he's sharing that with Timothy, which both helps Timothy help process Paul's death. In the modern day, Paul might say, this is my PIN number, this is my email account, but he's inviting Timothy into that space and that conversation with him, and it helps both of them prepare for that. It needs to become a conversation, especially for the sake of those that are statistically closer to the grave than you are. I want to read a selection from a book I've talked about a couple times. Gospel Comes with a House Key. The Gospel Comes with a House Key. It's the book Addie and I have been teaching out of quite a bit, by Rosaria Butterfield. There's a section where she talks about deathbed hospitality with her own mother, and I don't want to spoil it. I mean, she dies, that's obvious, but I don't want to spoil the situation around that, because you have to read this book. You have to. It's required. So I'm going to read you part of what Rosaria Butterfield says in reflection to her mother's dying days, and not her husband. Rosaria writes, there is a lot to do beside the bed of a dying mother. These were busy days, not listless ones. I realized after the first 10 minutes that this is a Christian art, the practice of deathbed hospitality. Dying people are fickle about pillows and people, the temperature of the water that flows up from the straw, and the way the shades are drawn. My mother developed a peculiar taste about visitors and avocados and watermelon. This is true. I learned how to administer the right amount of water to dying lips, to apply the right touch of oil to cracking skin, to lift her weak frame and adjust her back pillow, to push the morphine button when needed, though your nurse was me not to do that. And then, when one of Mom's friends begged me to, quote, put her out of her misery by overusing morphine, I learned another important art of deathbed hospitality, putting up the no visitors sign and unplugging the phone in her room. After the 5th of what would become 8 days at the deathbed, I realized something. Not everyone can come to Christ in the fullness of life. While the world, the flesh, and the devil are raging and strong, but anyone led by the Spirit can come to Christ on the deathbed when the flesh is weak. Anyone, even my mother, who is not a Christianist. But who will lead the way? Who will proclaim the fullness of Christ in the presence of this weakness? If you are not at the deathbed, you cannot offer hospitality. Hospitality always requires hands and heads and hearts and mess and sacrifice and deepness. Always. And I will not spoil the outcome of her investment of time and presence at her mother's deathbed, a raging, angry atheist mother. But you should read the book. So we understand The Gospel Comes with a House Key by Rosaria Butterfield. Her husband is a Reformed Presbyterian minister, and she's writing from her perspective. So we understand that we must talk about death and talk about it before death even occurs, just like Jesus did, just like Paul did. We know that we should be involved hands-on and physically and emotionally available. She talks about the practicality of help at the bedside. And I think this one's really important to note because I work at the hospital as a nurse. I work on the med-surg floor at Matsuy Regional Medical Center. And my favorite patients are my hospice patients. I love my dying patients. I love the opportunity it gives me to be the right person at that point in their life. I do not experience an existential crisis at a deathbed because death doesn't give me questions. I have full confidence on what's going to happen to me after I die. Not looking forward to the death process. I have seen a billion different ways to die, and I have a list of ones I don't want now that I've worked as a nurse. But I'm not scared of what's after, right? Not scared in a I don't know what's going to happen. And so I'm able to bring that confidence and that peace into that room. And I'll tell you what, not all my coworkers have that because we talk about it. When they've got a dying patient, we talk about it at the nurse's station, how they wish they did not have this patient because they hate thinking about death, which is crazy to me as a nurse because you have it all the time. So there's a few things that I have learned as a nurse. This is my first deathbed I've ever been by the way. I've never been at the deathbed of someone I'm close to. I have learned there's things you can do, just like when you are hospitable in a home and you have a meal, you can be hospitable at a deathbed. Moistening mouths and lips. I'll keep this short because I know class is about over. But moistening mouth and lips, that's something you can do. Singing or playing music if you're an awful singer. That, or they might not care. Playing music is such a distraction from your bodily experience. For patients that don't have families and I don't have time to sit in there and sing, which I do sometimes, we play a radio. What else could you do? Turning an individual side to side to relieve pressure points. They can't ask for these things at a certain stage in their death progression, but they need them. When people are experiencing something called air hunger, you've seen dying people gasping, blowing air across their face, or letting a nurse know they need morphine. Both of those things relieve air hunger. Please do not try and reorient a dying patient or a family member. If they see someone in the room, you are not to say they are not there. You say, are you scared? Do you feel safe? Because that's their new reality. They're not your withdrawing alcohol patient who you're trying to bring back to our reality. They're not a post-op patient you're trying to bring back. Hey girls, they are in their own reality. And so we need to orient them to keep them safe within their own world. I think that's the biggest one we see families struggle with. I have a list of things we could talk about and ways to be practical and helpful. The biggest thing is to give someone space when they need it, permission when they need it, and love all the time. So I'll cut this a little short. But anyways, there's quite a difference in the room when a Christian is dying and someone who's not a Christian is dying. Your goal when someone who's not a Christian is dying, it is to them, just like Rosaria's mother, read the book, it is to them to witness to them in those final moments, because no moment's too late. But my bigger goal in the hospital is to witness to their family, because they see the way you treat them. And that testimony could change the rest of their life. Well, we'll cut off right now, but thank you all so much for being here and for sharing your stories with me. Y'all have a good day.